Hello and welcome back to THM, and today we're on episode 2 of BTCC Rule Benders. Now before we get into it, if you didn't see our last episode, that was about the Alfa Romeo 155 and their trick front and rear wing. And today we're going to be looking at something from a very similar period of time, but a completely different car. Before we get into it, as always, make sure you like, share and subscribe to my channel to see more BTCC content. Let's get into it. Now, we are going back to the 1990s and back to the super touring days. Now, a lot of the kind of technical innovations and little cheeky rule bending was done in this time. Because if you remember, it was a case of loads and loads of manufacturer entries. So if you won, you looked great against the other manufacturers. If you lost, you looked a little bit pants. So people were throwing stupid amounts of money at British touring cars at the time to make sure they beat the other manufacturers. One of those manufacturers were Volvo, who teamed up with Formula 1 TWR, that is Tom Walkinshaw Racing, who has had a whole... They were probably one of the best teams in motorsport at the time. They've done Le Mans stuff, F1 stuff, all sorts, so they're really good. And they entered this, the Volvo 850 Estate, which is probably one of the most well-known and most loved touring cars in history. But there was one problem. The 5-cylinder engine that TWR were developing wouldn't push past the 260 brake horsepower mark for love nor money, and this at a time where most of the touring car teams were running at about 285 brake horsepower roughly, so they were seriously down on power on a really long car, as you can see. So rather than scrap it and start something else, TWR read into the rulebook a little bit. So after studying the rulebook, which basically stated that they have to use a production cylinder head, they could port them, they could fit bigger valves, but they could not weld extra metal to the inside or on the head. They couldn't modify the valve angle either. But it didn't say you couldn't cut stuff off. They didn't say you couldn't add metal by bolting it on. And they didn't say what angle the head had to sit at the block. So guess what TWR done? They done all of that really, and a bit more. They pretty much chopped the whole top half of the head off and bolted it onto a custom billet setup that housed the big valves and cams which the rules allowed. The standard valve angle wasn't ideal either, it was too steep, but that wasn't allowed to be changed. But as the angle that the head bolted on the block wasn't mentioned in the rules, they cut a wedge out of it. So what's left of the production part was tilted in a way which allowed a shallower exhaust port and a steeper inlet port design. So very sneakily, or very cleverly, depending on how you look at it, there was enough left of the Volvo head to still pass as a production head. But this new design, and you can see the difference here, the original one's on the right and the TWR modified one is on the left in this photograph, produced 325 brake horsepower, which is about 65 horsepower more than before, and pretty much the most powerful engine in the field. So that was the story of how TWR got an extra 65 brake horsepower out of this absolute weapon of a touring car. Let us know in the comments below what other teams and what other cars have got little quirks like this, and perhaps we can do a part 3 to the video. As always, don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and as always, we'll see you next time.